Welcome to Refined Focus. I am your host, Ben Markham, and honestly, I wasn't sure if I was going to get this episode out on time. The weather here has been a little bit dicey, so getting to the studio was a challenge. And I've got a couple of large client projects that are moving, but here we are. My goal is going forward to be able to get one of these shows out to you guys every Friday. However, for now, I'm also a one-person team. So if an episode is ever a little late, I apologize. On a different note, I want to send a huge thank you to the people who reached out to me over the past week to share their thoughts on the show. I honestly can't begin to express to you how happy that made me. If you haven't heard the other episodes, please go back and give those a listen. And while you're there, I would greatly appreciate a 5-star review and a follow if you think I've earned it. That will just help the show to reach more people that might find a little value in it. All right, so you've felt it, right? That feeling that you're not good enough, that you don't belong, that any success that you have, it's probably just luck, right? And sooner or later, people are gonna figure you out. Full transparency, I have been a working artist since I was 15 years old, and I've been running a successful business since 2013. And that feeling still sneaks in on me from time to time. And it's not just related to art and to business. My wife just said the other day that she was feeling it at the gym in regard to her lifting program. It's something that many of us deal with from time to time, and it sucks when it happens. So what causes it? Why is it such a common issue? And most importantly, how do we deal with it? Imposter syndrome is basically this nagging belief that you're a fraud, a phony. The feeling that you're doing a thing, but you just know that people know that you're faking it. You might look at your own work and only see the flaws while assuming everyone else has it all figured out. You might even downplay the whole thing and think they were just being nice when they like my work. What's crazy is this feeling can exist even when there's actual evidence that you are good or you're improving at what you're doing. You could be getting amazing feedback from clients. You could be booking at a regular basis, even winning awards, and you still feel like a fraud. So what causes imposter syndrome? A big thing right now to consider is how much time do you spend on social media? Did you see that beautiful studio that one photographer has? Or what about that stunning piece of art that one of your favorites just shared? And every time you see that person post anything, they're with yet another client. They must be booked out for the entire next year. So next time you start going down that rabbit hole, I want my voice to pop into your head and be a part of your inner monologue. I want you to hear this. Social media isn't real. It's a curated life that people want you to see. Most people aren't going to show you the parts of their studio that are unfinished. I literally just finished the bathroom in my studio after being in this space for 3 years. It looked like a truck stop. There wasn't a chance in hell I was going to show that off on my social media. Nobody else is showing you all of the pieces of art or letting you hear the pieces of music that they've worked on or read the stories that they've written that didn't show them at their best. They're only going to show you the best of the best work. I don't post the photos from a session that don't look good. How do you know that the person that always looked booked is working with paying clients? Maybe they're just doing content shoots. The point is, don't trust social media. And then the little voice may say something like, but what if I'm not as good as the other artist? Good. That means that you get to keep growing and learning. That's the fun part of being an artist or growing a business, is that there's always going to be somebody better than you, but you're not competing with them, right? The only person that you're competing with is the you from yesterday. Honestly, my work from when I started my photography business can't hold a candle to the work that I do now. And hopefully, my work 10 years from now is that much better than the work that I'm making today. Think about how absolutely boring it would be if we were instantly the best at our art or the business or our hobbies. What would be the point of doing them? Focus on your journey and focus on growth. Remember, comparison is the thief of joy. A very close friend of comparison is perfectionism. You know, when you just stare at your screen, picking apart every single detail and telling yourself that this isn't good enough. I can't share this until it's perfect. So let me ask you this. Right now, in this moment, what's more important? Trying to fix every single perceived flaw, no matter how much time it takes, or getting the work to a really good place, then starting to work on something new with the knowledge that you picked up from your first piece, from something wasn't right in that last piece. So you now know you've got to keep an eye out for that in the future, right? From personal experience, when I first started photographing people, I missed details all the time. A stray hair here, a collar out of place there, and on and on and on. Every time I caught it in Photoshop when I was doing my retouching, that mistake would burn into my brain. And I wouldn't make those same mistakes again. Sometimes the mistakes took a couple times, but it eventually got burned into my brain and I would look for those details. However, I still put the work out there. If I didn't, I would have never booked clients. Most of the time, the small details were things that people never noticed. Me, as a photographer, is going to look for a lot of different details in a piece that a client or someone who isn't a photographer isn't going to look for. So while details are important and something that you need to pay attention to, don't let it hang you up. Don't let it stop you from sharing your work with the world. Do I still make mistakes? Absolutely. I probably always will, but that can't stop me from moving forward. I mean, Led Zeppelin has a load of songs where John Bonham's bass drum pedal squeaks. Yet, the albums are still out, and I'm pretty sure that Zeppelin did pretty okay. If you'd like an example, look up the song Since I've Been Loving You. Another big reason many of us are struggling with imposter syndrome is that we never feel like we've made it, right? But what's happening is the goalpost keeps moving. Let me give you an example. When I was getting going, one of my goals was to have a 6-figure year. And I'd hear other photographers saying that they'd done it, so I knew that it was possible. And I would think, if I can do that, my business will finally be successful. And then I did it. And it was cool. Don't get me wrong. But then I started hearing people doing multiple 6 figures. And so now that goalpost has moved, right? Now I want multiple years, 6-figure years. I felt like and feel like there's more to be achieved. And I am driven to do it. And I can tell you tons of other examples from my journey to illustrate this point. But what it really comes down to is, for many of us, the more you grow, the more you realize there's a lot more to do, and that can make you feel like you haven't achieved. The trick is to let go of the I'm not there yet and start to celebrate when you do hit a goal. You earned that victory. Then, if you want to go after more, take that as an adventure. I really like the analogy of a spiral staircase, right? So imagine that you're at the bottom of a spiral staircase that's going up into a ceiling, right? So you can't see the full picture on what's on top. You can only see directly what's above you, right? So you walk up the staircase, and then when you get to the top, there's an entirely new space that's filled with opportunity. Had you not taken the climb, you'd have never known it was there. But now that you do, you get to decide what to do with that. But then you may ask yourself, but what are other people going to think? What if they think that I'm a fraud? What if they think I'm just wasting my time and being silly? So, a little tough love for you. This is not just a fear of judgment. It's your ego getting in your way. And don't get me wrong, ego is not a bad thing. I think you need to have a healthy ego, a sense of self-esteem. You need to believe in yourself. However, where it becomes a problem is when you start letting what you think other people are going to think about you get in the way of you using your gifts and your talents to create the art you want, to create the life you want, to create the business that you want, to chase your dreams. So keep this in mind. What other people think of you is, quite frankly, none of your business. If other people are using any of their brain space to think about what you're doing or creating, that's on them. Truth be told, other people really aren't spending any time thinking about you. They're focused on their own lives. So, yet another example. I'm a huge wrestling fan. I spend zero time in my day wondering what CM Punk is doing. If you do have haters and people out there who want to talk crap about you, that means that you're probably doing something right. As I talked about in the last episode about who you surround yourself with, people who are successful and are in a growth mindset don't spend any time at all being negative about other people. People who do talk trash are the ones in a lack mindset. They're the ones not progressing. They feel like you've passed them by and they want to keep you where they are. It's the idea, if you have a bucket full of crabs and one crab tries to get out, all the other crabs in the bucket will pull the one back in. It's the same thing. So don't let your ego stop you from creating. And so now that we know the causes of imposter syndrome, what do we do with that? Because if we don't deal with it, it can keep us stuck, too afraid to put ourselves out there, too anxious to appreciate our own progress. And the first step is just to acknowledge that imposter syndrome is just a feeling. It's not a fact. Just because you feel like a fraud doesn't mean that you are. Imposter syndrome exists because you care about what you're doing. If you didn't, you wouldn't be worried about being good enough. Like, think about all the people who are perfectly happy to work at a 9-to-5 job for a paycheck only, right? Do you for a split second think that they're worried about being good enough? And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with being content at a 9-to-5. If that's where you want to be, that's awesome. But for many, this is a very different mindset, right? The very fact that you're questioning yourself means that you're invested in your craft, and that is a good thing. And this is something you're going to hear me talk about as we take this journey together. Gratitude. Take a step back. Look at where you started versus where you are now. Celebrate that and you for getting here. I started my photography business in a kitchen in a shotgun house. It was tiny. Now, when imposter syndrome tries to pop up, I take a step back. I look at my studio. I look at the beautiful art on the walls. I think about what my clients tell me and why they decided to book me. I think about the notes that some of you have sent me about this show, and I think, oh, I did this. And if I did this, I can keep going. And sometimes this is easier said than done, but you've got to stop the comparison game. Social media is a double-edged sword. It can be inspiring, but it can also be a massive trigger for imposter syndrome. If you find yourself constantly comparing your work to others and feeling like you don't measure up, take a step back. Unfollow accounts that make you feel inadequate, or at least limit your time scrolling. Focus on your own growth, not on how you stack up to someone else's journey, especially because you know that you're not seeing the whole story. I also know that imposter syndrome comes from a fear of failure. Like, if we messed up, we'll be exposed, where, everybody's going to know that we're a fraud. And failure really is just a part of the process. Every successful creative person and entrepreneur that you admire has failed. Probably a lot. The difference is they kept going. Instead of seeing mistakes as a proof that you're not good enough, try seeing them as necessary steps forward to improvement. And, like we talked about in the last episode, who you surround yourself with is important. Imposter syndrome thrives in silence. The more we talk about it, the more we realize that we're not alone. I guarantee that some of the most talented people you know have felt the same way. So reach out, talk to other creatives, friends, mentors. Chances are they've been there too. And sometimes just hearing, yeah, man, I get it, is enough to take the power away from that self-doubt. Imposter syndrome doesn't mean you're not talented. It doesn't mean you're a fraud. It just means that you're growing. It means that you care. The fact that you doubt yourself sometimes just means you're pushing yourself to be better, and that is a good thing, as long as you don't let it stop you from putting your work into the world. Full transparency. Imposter syndrome was something that I struggled with a lot when even considering to start this podcast. Sometimes trying something new is scary. So if you're dealing with imposter syndrome, I just want to say, you're not alone. You are more capable than you think. Thank you so much for listening. If you think that I've earned it, be sure to leave the show a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. And while you're there, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. It's a small thing, but it truly helps the show grow and reach more people. If you know someone who would benefit from hearing this show, please feel free to share this with them as well. You can find me on Instagram at Ben Markham Photo and at Boudoir by Ben Markham, and on TikTok at Ben Markham. If you want to support the show in a different way, you can also become a supporter of mine on Patreon. I will put all of my social links in the show description. Do what you can to make the world a better place, and I will look forward to seeing you back here next week on Refined Focus.